Hi everyone, and welcome back to topic 3 of lesson 1 on the A Level Economics for AQA course. In this video we'll be taking a look at positive and normative economic statements. This topic covers the third bullet point of section 4.1.1.1 economic methodology in the course specification. So, let's get started. On the screen right now are some economic statements. These are the sort of things you might hear on a day-to-day basis concerning economics, with common economic topics at the moment including things like unemployment, Brexit, and the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. You might have noticed that some of these statements sound like someone's beliefs or opinions, whilst others seem to just state facts. It is this important distinction that forms the basis of this topic. Taking a look in any newspaper or on a news website, you'll be sure to find lots of economic statements. In fact, it might be reading such headlines that made you choose economics as a subject to study at A level. Here we see some headlines state a fact, such as UK unemployment falls to lowest level since 1975, or car sales slumped to 20-year September low despite new reg plates. The other headlines are written as someone's own opinion, such as austerity has never worked, or cheer up, Brexit would help British GDP. When reading stories like this in the media, it is important to consider the source and the possible political bias of the author. There are two different types of statements in economics: positive statements and normative statements. All economic statements will fit into one of these categories, but not both. Positive statements are those that we can test using the available evidence, and by doing so, we can prove them to be correct or incorrect. Positive statements are objective in their nature, and all statements of fact are positive statements. Here's an example. Reducing the price of bus tickets will increase the number of people travelling to work by bus. This is a positive statement, because we could measure the effect of reducing prices on the quantity sold. Because we could test the statement, it is a positive statement. Here's another. The UK rate of inflation for August 2020, as measured by the CPIH, was 0.5%. This is a positive statement because CPIH can be calculated by looking at the change in prices of a representative basket of products. Indeed, this calculation is done monthly in the UK by the Office for National Statistics. Because the statement can be tested using evidence and proved to be correct or incorrect, it is a positive statement. Consumption of alcohol will decrease as a minimum price was introduced. This is something that has appeared in the news a few times in recent years. It is a positive statement because we could test whether alcohol consumption does actually decrease following the introduction of a minimum price. Again, because we could test the statement and prove it to be correct or incorrect, it is a positive statement. What makes these statements positive is our ability to check whether they are correct or incorrect through testing them by looking at the available evidence. It is important to remember that the word positive here does not mean optimistic or correct, as the word positive sometimes does elsewhere. It just means that the statement can be tested and proved to be correct or incorrect. Positive statements do not need to be correct. A statement that is tested but proved to be incorrect would still be a positive statement. The important thing is that the statement can be tested, and this makes it a positive statement. Testing a statement using evidence and proving it to be incorrect is known as falsification. We falsify the statement. Let's take a look at this example. The rate of unemployment in the UK between May and July 2020 was 5.5%. Looking at data from the Office for National Statistics, the unemployment rate in the UK was actually 4.1% during this period, but it is still a positive statement because we were able to prove it to be incorrect using evidence. Let's now move on to take a look at normative statements. Normative statements are those that contain a value judgment. They are not a statement of fact. They cannot be tested, and so they cannot be proved to be correct or incorrect. They are subjective statements, and so include thoughts and beliefs. Here's an example of a normative statement. The government should increase the amount of funding given to the NHS. This statement is normative because it represents an individual's personal beliefs, and we are not able to test it. Because we are not able to test it, it is a normative statement. Here's another. It is unfair to charge tuition fees to university students. This is a normative statement, because whether or not tuition fees are fair is a value judgment. We are not able to test it, and so it cannot be proved to be correct or incorrect. This statement is similar to the previous one, but instead of saying that tuition fees are unfair, it now says that tuition fees reduce the likelihood of poorer students going to university. This is now a positive statement because we could test whether an increase in tuition fees reduces the number of poorer students attending university. It may not be an easy test to conduct, but it is technically possible to test it, and so it is a positive statement. To determine whether a statement is positive or normative, we look at whether or not the statement can be tested using evidence and proved to be correct or incorrect. If the statement can be tested, it is positive. If it cannot be tested, it is normative. Often a clue as to whether a statement is positive or normative will be found in some of the words used. In a positive statement, we often see words that are quite definitive and narrow in their meaning, such as is, are, was, and will be. In normative statements, we see words that indicate a value judgment, such as should be, ought to be, fairer, or waste. An extension to positive and normative statements is categorising economics into positive economics and normative economics. Positive economics describes, measures, and explains economic phenomena using scientific methods. Normative economics, on the other hand, investigates what the outcomes of economic policies ought to be. If we compare positive and normative statements side by side, we can see how they differ. Positive statements are based on data and facts, whereas normative statements are based on opinions and values. Positive statements can be described as being objective in their nature, whereas normative statements are subjective. Positive statements describe what actually is, while normative statements describe what ought to be. Finally, positive statements can be tested and proved to be correct or incorrect, whilst it is not possible to do this for normative statements. We've now reached the end of this topic, so let's quickly summarise what we have learned. All economic statements fall into one of two different categories: positive statements and normative statements. Positive statements can be tested using the available evidence and proved to be correct or incorrect. Normative statements contain value judgments. They cannot be tested and so cannot be proved to be correct or incorrect. That's it for today. Thanks for listening.